In a small village called Uvuma, there lived a young man named Kazim. Kazim was strong and worked hard on his family's farm. His family wasn't rich, but they had enough food to eat because they worked together. Every morning, Kazim woke up early, ready to start his day. He had many things to do: planting, weeding, and harvesting. One morning, Kazim packed his tools and headed to the farm. As he walked through the village, he greeted the elders sitting by the big tree. The children played games and the women carried baskets of foods to the market. The sun shone brightly and the breeze felt cool against Kazim's skin. He hummed a song his mother had taught him. The path to the farm was long, but it was peaceful. Kazim loved the quiet of the forest, the chirping of the birds and the rustling of the leaves. Suddenly, something shiny caught his eye. He stopped and saw a skull lying on the ground. It was white and looked very old. Kazim stepped closer and wondered who it belonged to. It was strange to see a skull lying there, so far from the village. As Kazim bent down to look at it, the skull spoke. "It is the mouth that kept me here," the skull said in a soft, raspy voice. Kazim jumped back in shock. "Did you just speak?" he asked. But the skull was silent again. Kazim felt a strange chill. He picked up his pace and continued to the farm. But the words of the skull echoed in his mind. What did it mean? How could a skull talk? After a long day of working on the farm, Kazim was tired. He had picked yams, harvested cassava, and gathered firewood. The sun was setting, and the sky was turning orange. Kazim was happy to be going home. He carried his basket of food, ready to share it with his family. As he walked down the same forest path, Kazim thought about the strange thing he had seen that morning. He couldn't stop thinking about the talking skull. Suddenly, Kazim stopped. There lying in the grass was the same skull. It was exactly where he had seen it earlier. Kazim's heart began to race. How could it be here again? Hadn't he walked past this spot earlier? He bent down looking at the skull closely. How did you get here? Kazim asked, still unsure if he was dreaming. The skull spoke again, just like before. It is the mouth that kept me here. Kazim's mouth went dry. His mind raced. The skull had said the same thing again. He couldn't understand it, but something deep inside him felt that the skull was trying to tell him something important. Kazim quickly hurried home. He needed to tell someone what had happened. But who would believe him? Would anyone believe that a skull could talk? When Kazim arrived in the village, he couldn't wait to tell the elders what he had seen. They were sitting under the big tree, talking and laughing as usual. Elders, you won't believe what happened today, Kazim shouted. I saw a talking skull in the forest. The elders stopped talking and turned to Kazim. Some of them raised their eyebrows and others looked confused. A talking skull? Dano, the oldest youth leader, asked. Kazim, are you sure? Skulls don't talk. I am sure, Kazim said. The skull spoke to me. It said, it is the mouth that kept me here. The villagers looked at each other, unsure if they should believe Kazim. Some of them laughed. Maybe you were dreaming, one villager said. But Kazim shook his head. No, I heard it with my own ears. The skull really spoke to me. The elders looked at each other, and then at Kazim. They didn't want to hurt his feelings, but they didn't believe him either. Skulls don't talk, Dano said gently. You must be imagining things, Kazim. Kazim's heart sank. He knew what he had seen, but how could he prove it to the villagers? They thought he was telling lies. Kazim couldn't stop thinking about the skull. He knew it had spoken to him, but the villagers didn't believe him. He decided that he had to prove to them that he was telling the truth. One afternoon, Kazim stood in the middle of the village and spoke loudly so that everyone could hear him. Listen, everyone, Kazim said. I know you all think I am lying, but I swear the skull spoke to me. I will prove it. If I take you to the skull and it doesn't speak, you can punish me. But if it does speak, you will have to believe me." The villagers stared at Kazim. Some of them were curious, and others were still doubtful. "Are you sure, Kazim?" Daniel asked. "What if it doesn't speak? What will you do?" Kazim smiled. "If the skull does not speak, you can punish me in any way you like. But if it does speak, you must listen to me." The elders discussed it for a while and finally agreed. "All right, Kazim, we will follow you. But if you are wrong, we will punish you," Daniel said. Kazim's heart pounded. He was nervous, but he was also excited. He was about to prove to the village that the skull really could speak. The villagers followed Kazim as he led them through the forest path. The air was cool and the trees whispered in the wind. Kazim walked quickly, hoping that the skull would speak when they reached it. The villagers murmured as they walked. "What if Kazim is right?" one villager asked. "What if the skull really can talk?" "I don't believe it," another villager replied. "Skulls don't speak. They are just bones." Kazim led them to the spot where he had found the skull. There it was, lying on the ground just like before. Kazim felt a chill run down his spine. He had been right. The skull was still here. "Here it is," Kazim said, pointing to the skull. "Now let's see if it will speak." He bent down and picked up the skull. "Skull, will you speak to us?" Kazim asked. For a moment, nothing happened. The skull was silent. The villagers waited, holding their breath. "Skull," Kazim said again, "please speak." But the skull remained still. It did not speak. The villagers began to laugh. "See? We told you, Kazim. Skulls don't talk," Dano said with a chuckle. Kazim's heart sank. The skull had not spoken. It was just a skull, nothing more. But he refused to give up. Kazim was determined to prove the skull spoke. He picked up the skull and shook it in his hands. "Please, skull, speak now," he cried. But the skull did not speak. It just lay there, cold and silent. The villagers were growing impatient. "Kazim, you've made us walk all this way for nothing," one of them said. "Maybe you should admit you were wrong," another added. But Kazim couldn't give up. He was sure the skull had spoken to him before. "It will speak," he whispered to himself. "I know it will." In a fit of frustration, Kazim threw the skull to the ground and stomped on it. He shouted, "Speak, skull! Speak now, or I will never believe in you again." But the skull stayed silent. The villagers were done with the game. They turned to leave, and Kazim followed them, still holding the skull in his hands. "Please," he muttered, "please, let it speak." But it was too late. As they walked back to the village, Kazim was struck by a rock thrown from the crowd. The pain was sharp, and he collapsed to the ground. As Kazim lay on the ground lifeless, something strange happened. The villagers stopped and stared at the body. Then in the silence, they heard a voice. It was the same gravelly voice Kazim had heard before. "It is the mouth that kept me here," the skull said softly. The villagers froze. The skull had spoken, but it was too late. Kazim had died, and now the skull's words would never reach him. The villagers realized the truth too late. They had laughed at Kazim, and now they could never apologize. Dano knelt beside Kazim's body, his heart heavy with regret. "What have we done?" he whispered. The villagers were filled with sorrow. They had laughed at Kazim when he was alive, but now they understood. Kazim had been right all along. The skull had spoken, but only after Kazim was gone. The elders gathered together and decided to build a small memorial for Kazim at the spot where he had fallen. They honored him for his bravery and his belief in the impossible. From that day on, the villagers learned an important lesson. Sometimes words have power. Kazim had tried to teach them this, and now they would never forget. The story of Kazim and the talking skull was told to every child in the village. It was a story of faith, belief, and power of the mouth. How words can keep things alive or bring them to ruin. The villagers learned to listen and to respect the mysteries of the world, just like Kazim had done. And though Kazim was no longer with them, his memories lived on in their hearts. What are the moral lessons you've derived from this story? Number 1, think before you speak. The phrase, "It is the mouth that kept me here," highlights the power and consequences of words. Careless or hasty speech can lead to irreversible outcomes. 2, beware of pride and stubbornness. Kazim's insistence on proving himself right, even at great personal risk, ultimately led to his tragic fate. Sometimes, humility and caution are wiser than seeking validation. 3, the danger of disbelief. The villagers' refusal to believe Kazim teaches us the importance of keeping an open mind, especially when faced with unusual or unfamiliar situations. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, comment, and share. Bye!